So now we're entering into the area that gets a little bit more useful, and that is the area of file processing. And this is a super important deal. Remember, you have the beginning parts with the what's the variables, what are if statements, how to do loops, printing obviously, and now, but a lot of this stuff has been basically hard code some input or get input from the user, and then print to the screen. That's not usually how you're going to do a lot of processing, right? There's definitely going to be some times that you're going to be asking people for stuff, and then there's going to be times that you're going to be printing stuff, but it's not necessarily the way massive processing is done. It certainly isn't the way processing is done in my world. So what we need to do is we need to understand how in the world does file processing work in both in programming and in Python. So here's a quick thing for you here. So I'm going to do a couple videos on this one, but right now this is going to be basic nuts and bolts, how to read, write, and add to an existing file. All right. So, but I'm going to start with a writing. So in this case, how do you do that? Well, we create a special kind of variable. So if you guys remember, when I said that x is assigned 5, and then there's a function there that says what is x? Well, x is an integer, right? If I say x is assigned 5.5, and then I say, well, what is x? X is a float, right? And if I say x is assigned 5, what's 5? What's x? I should say x is a string. So you can see that, again, these variables have different types. Well, there's a special type that actually points to files. What is that type? That type happens like this. I'm going to call it, by the way, a file handle. I think, in all honesty, that probably comes from my ancient past, and I don't know if it's hip anymore to call it a file handle. But what it really is, it's a variable that points to a file, right? So my business, we would call it a file handle. So I'm going to go x is assigned open. So there's an open function, and notice what it's asking for here. It's asking for what's the name of the file, what is the mode, and then a bunch of other crap that we're not going to talk about. So I'm going to say open the file. I'm going to call it basically experiment.txt, and I'd like you to open it in write. We're going to start off with write. So I'm going to go open. Now, right there, it's open it. What is x now? X is an input output text IO wrapper. So that's pretty complicated, but what it's basically saying at this point is that this guy is ready to write output. Instead of to the screen, it's going to write it to the file. So I can say, for example, if I said print hello world, that's going to come to the screen. But if my file handle says to write hello world, notice what we're seeing here again with the tooltip here. What's happening here is that it's giving me some code back, which you could argue doesn't really matter. I'm not sure, but it did write that out somewhere. Now the big question is, where did it actually write it out? And I'm gonna get to that in a second here. Before I play much more with this, I'm going to close the file handle. At this point, when I go open, there's an active pointer from my memory to the file. Now, then I wrote along that sort of thread, if you want. And then now I'm going to close, and I'll basically release the link, right? So I'm going to go x close. All right, so the big question is, where is that file exp.txt? So if I go file in my environment and I go open, what I want you to notice, I'm going to say all, it's going by default to wherever my Python was installed. That's okay, but it's not ideal, right? By the way, let me just open this so you can see in all of its glory the hello world. right off on the other screen. There it is right there. So I don't usually want this file to be opened in my Python directory. What if I want the file to be opened in an area that I'm controlling off my desktop, an FOP directory, and something called demo? How can I get my environment to change the directory or change the folder, change the directory? So, and again, it helps to remember, by the way, although these are called folders, back in the ancient days, let's get this guy up here. This is called a directory, and I think, oh boy, it's been a long time, but let's DR. So let's go CD desktop. Nope, no, that didn't work. DR, that's a quick peek. Okay, I'm just going to go to contacts, just or actually downloads. So CD change directory downloads, right? So these are called directories, and that's because, you know, I mean, that's what they were called. I know, appreciate all these fancy GUI operating systems are now called folders, but they were called directories before. So this directory here is where I want to change to. Now, I don't know how to code this environment to change that directory, but thankfully I don't have to, because a lot of people out there got together and they created a module called OS, which I think I've talked about this in one of the previous videos, but you know, Google it, you know, Python module OS, and you'll see a bunch of choices. And one of those choices is to go OS dot, I would like to use this function, change directories. Again, notice the environment giving me some help here. So what am I going to put in here? I'm going to put the path. I got to assume some knowledge here, but this is a path. That's a path. So I'm going to go copy. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to go. Now the problem here, as I know I talked about now I think about it, is if you remember /D/F/D, again, these things will be interpreted as special characters. We don't want that. So what we need to do to get this to work properly is we need to go and put an extra slash in front of each of these slashes. I'll remind you of the /N, the /T, those all mean something. So in this case, this will now change the directory. And I cannot remember what it is that shows the directory now that I'm thinking about it. Is it, will you help me at all here? List? Yeah, I can't remember what it is. And you know what? I suppose I could pause and find it, but I'm not going to. You guys can Google that if you want. But at this point, I've changed the directory to here. Now, we're going to be able to prove this by going to that directory. So here I'm in that directory. Now watch what happens when I repeat some of these steps here. I'm going to open up a file exp.txt. As soon as I hit the enter button, it creates it right up here in memory. You might want to rewind and watch it again to see that happen again. It creates it. Now there's nothing in it. It's completely empty. But right now this environment is pointing to that file. It's pointing to it so much, by the way, that if I wanted to go ahead and try to delete this, the operating system can't, because this guy, my Python environment, is pointing to it, right? If I close it, which I'll do right there by doing that command, if I close it, I can then delete it, and it's got no problem, right? So that's kind of a neat little demonstration for yourself, and a reason, by the way, why you should always open and close before, make sure that's working before you do any of the other processing. So I'm going to open it again, copy, hit that button. So it's back. I'm now going to do my write, copy, write. I'm going to hit the button. Now, what's this doing? If we have a look, it looks like nothing's happening. You know why? Because it's kind of written. It's sort of, it's kind of like sending a letter in the mail. I've sent the letter in the mail, but it hasn't been delivered yet. As soon as I close this file, and I go back in here, in fact, you probably saw that might have changed right there to 1K. Now I got the hello world, right? So there's some basic writing. Now, what if I want to add to that? If I want to add to that, I can open it again, open the same file again, but I can append this basically means to add on. So I add on. If I go append and then I go write, and I'm going to write something, hello world again is my target here. So hello world again. And then I close it out. What's in here? It appended hello world again right at the end of hello world. And that gives you a hint, by the way, as to how write works. Write doesn't give you a free new line. It doesn't give you a free new line. All right, so that's kind of exciting. So let's go a little bit further now. I've closed the file. So I've shown you now writing will create the file. Appending will add on to an existing file. And then there's going to be a read coming up. But there's one more thing I should show you about the write. So what happens if I open up a file that's got stuff in it and I just use write? If I do that, so I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close it. Well, actually, you can see right there what happened. There's no more data in here anymore. So what it did is it basically got rid of the original one and then opened up a brand new one, right? So that's why you got to be careful. If you want to preserve the data, there's going to be an append. Now, our next stop on our journey, ultimately, once we finish with files, is to talk about error processing. And maybe what we can do is, create an "Are you sure?" or any of that kind of stuff on here. But for now, just understand that write will write over top of whatever you've got. Append will append on to whatever you've got. Another natural follow-on question to this would be, what happens if you try to write, or if you try to open a file for write? So let me open a file for append, that doesn't exist. And if you do that, it goes ahead and again creates it again, right? So that's what happens there. Okay, so let's close that again. All right, so I think at this point, I'm going to stop this video, and this will be all dedicated to writing. The next video, where I'm going to start with a read. All right, so the next video, I'm going to start with a read. Before I do, I got to deal with this whole, what happens if you want to write more than one line and you don't want it to be squished together. So let's go ahead, do another write here. And I think some of you probably have kind of already figured this out. If I want to write hello world on its own line and then hello world again, then all I got to do is start putting those special characters there, like /n. Once I've done that, and then I'm going to go and do the hello world again with a /n. If I want, I don't have to, I guess, but if I want. Then I close it out. And I go in here and I have a look, and there's hello world again. So what I'm basically saying is that when you start writing to files, it's going to be this big stream. And if you want to have breaks like tabs or new lines, you need to put that into your stream. That's what that is. All right, that's enough for that one. We'll move from that to how to read a file.